I will call on Deputy Alan Kelly to introduce his second question, and you have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Minister. It's quite unfortunate that Minister Ross isn't available to answer this question, and you had to be pulled back up from Limerick or wherever you were. Understand he's heading out the country possibly, but this is really an issue that's deeply concerning to me for many different reasons, and I must declare at the beginning I was a former employee of Fáilte Ireland. And my question really relates to the process which they are engaging in relation to filling the post of Chief Executive. Now, it's very unusual that we have a minister called Minister Shane Ross, who used to sit on these benches, used to wax lyrical in the Sunday Independent, constantly about quangos, about State Board appointments, about Chief Executive appointments, about many other issues. And then we have a public appointment system. And the agency, which, after 6 months in office, he has still refused to meet, once even, are now not engaging in using the past system to fill the Chief Executive's post. Instead, they're using a company called AMROP. And transparency just isn't there. So, Minister, why isn't your Senior Minister Ross using the PAS system to give transparency to this process? In a question to the Minister previously, written answer, he responded that it was a response to me that Fáilte Ireland weren't obliged to. This isn't about being obliged to. There are many other agencies. If you look up the PAS website, you'll see that there are many agencies that use it. In fact, another agency under the Minister's remit is currently using it this very day to fill vacancies. So, one of the biggest marketing jobs of Ireland into the future, and given Brexit and everything, an incredibly important job, is not being filled by the Minister in a way which I would have expected him to do so, given his track record. So, do you feel that this is appropriate? Will the current process using a private company be stalled? Will it be re-advertised? Why has it taken so long? If this is the best process, why haven't they found anyone, Minister, and why haven't they been appointed? Is there an issue there that we need to be made aware of? And really, Minister, when it comes to this issue, I find it absolutely incredible that the department, of which you're another minister, were unable, unwilling, or didn't feel it necessary to have a representative on the actual interview process for the Chief Executive of one of the most important agencies. Now, I know the Secretary-General of your department quite well. He's a very capable man. He worked with me when I was in that department. I'm sure the Assistant Secretary, who I don't know, is very competent and capable as well. But do you not think that if you were going to jump outside PAS, at least at some level, that the department would have a role in the recruitment process to ensure that it would be transparent, to ensure that the best person is got, that the person would have energy and vision, which I understand are the two main requirements in relation to the role, and that we would end up getting the best person. Because there is a concern out there, Minister, that because your Senior Minister, Minister Ross, refuses to use the public appointment system, that there may be some form of reason why Fáilte Ireland are going around in the way in which they are. And looking at this appointment, we also want to know why the appointment hasn't been made, given that this company claims to be one of the best executive search companies on this planet, not just in this country, but yet after 6 months, they're incapable of filling the job. So what's the issue?
Minister, you've got 4 minutes. Thank you, Deputy.
Thanks very much, Cahir. Look, and I'll certainly pass on Deputy Kelly's concerns to the Minister for his well-being. He's actually on his way to he was on his way to the Ireland-New Zealand rugby match in Chicago, and I'll also pass on your good wishes to the Secretary-General. I would agree with you, the Secretary-General in the Department does a fantastic job, and the Assistant Secretary, whom you haven't met, you said, I can attest to that as well. He also does a very good job. So I have been informed by the Board of Fáilte Ireland that it has carried out a public recruitment process through the executive search company AMRAP, to which the Deputy referred, for the appointment of a CEO to Fáilte Ireland. The carrying out of such a process is a matter for the authority in accordance with its statutory functions and in accordance with government guidelines. The term of office of the current Chief Executive of Fáilte Ireland, Sean Quinn, is due to expire on the 31st of December 2016, and I should take this opportunity to acknowledge the contribution he has made in the impressive growth in the tourism sector over his years at the helm of Fáilte Ireland. The consent of the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform to filling the Chief Executive post was sought and received earlier this year and was subject to a number of conditions, including that the filling of the post be by means of an open competition. The Department was informed that the authority intends to run a public process, including by means of public advertisements. The statutory requirements governing the appointment of a CEO by Fáilte Ireland is set out in Section 31 of the National Tourism Development Authority Act 2003. In accordance with subsection 3 of that section, the Chief Executive is appointed by the authority with the consent of the Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport. Under subsection 7 of Section 31, the CEO shall hold office upon and subject to such terms and conditions, including terms and conditions relating to remuneration and allowances, as may be determined by Fáilte Ireland with the consent of the Minister, given with the consent also of the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. The Department has been advised that following consideration by the authority, it decided to undertake the recruitment process through a private recruitment firm rather than the public appointment service. The Minister has also been advised that the post was advertised in a number of publications in April 2016, including national daily newspapers and a national Sunday paper. In addition, an executive search process was undertaken by AMRAP. A high number of candidates were identified through the processes, and following a selection and interview process, a preferred candidate has now been identified. The authority has assured the Minister and myself, because I met the Chairman recently, that the search and selection process undertaken were robust and thorough, and that all candidates went through the same rigorous, transparent processes and were dealt with in a fair manner. On the 26th of October 2016, the authority sought the consent of the Minister to the appointment in accordance with the statutory obligations under Section 31(3) of the Act. The authority has also sought the consent of the Minister to the terms and conditions of the appointment under Section 31(7) of the Act. Both of these requests are under consideration. In relation to the latter, the Minister will consult with his colleague, the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform. In relation to the nature of the process carried out by the authority, the decision to undertake a public process through a private company rather than the public appointment service predates the Minister's or even my own appointment. However, we acknowledge the fact that the processes undertaken were carried out in an open and public and competitive process.
Chapter, you have 2 final minutes.
I find it bizarre, though, how you or Mr. Ross have confidence in your own department, but yet are incapable of putting one of the 2 senior people in charge onto the actual interview board. If this process had to be done outside of PASS, it is incomprehensible to me how a department who has an agency whose total funding comes from the taxpayer, but yet we didn't put one single person from the department on the interview panel. Now, I know who was on the interview panel as a matter of interest, and I think it could have done with a member of the department. I want to ask you, and I'm glad you met the Chairman, Minister, because Minister Ross hasn't had time for one of these most important agencies in his department. He hasn't had time to meet him, according to the reply I got, but I'm glad you met them. And you've said that the agency, Fáilte Ireland, have written with a preferred candidate. Will that candidate, is that being put forward, that candidate put forward, and will that candidate's salary be kept within the public service caps? Can you confirm and guarantee that here and now? I'd like that to be known. In relation to the overlap, which you say happened as regards the process that was undertaken, that's irrelevant, because you were in place very soon afterwards, and you could have stopped it. I'm sure you were briefed at your min-mac in relation to it on your first meeting in there, so that could have changed straight away. Now, let me just say this. I think Minister Ross is an absolute, total and utter hypocrite if he makes an appointment through this process, and if he does not use the public appointment system for one of the most senior appointments he's ever going to make as a minister. In that public appointment system at the moment, there are jobs within his department that go through it. So not to put this through, for me, smacks of total and utter hypocrisy by the Minister involved. And please don't be party to it, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy. You have a final 2 minutes, Minister.
Thanks very much. The Deputy will know, having been a Minister in this department himself, and indeed having headed up a government department himself in the Department of the Environment, there is no requirement on Fáilte Ireland, who are the authority in question here, to use the service that the Deputy is referring to. And the decision that Fáilte Ireland made in relation to the appointment process here, I have no reason to suggest that it's anything other than transparent. I have no reason to suggest that it's anything other than fair, and I have no reason or evidence to suggest that it's anything other than a process to try and identify the best possible candidate. Now, if there is some reason that the Deputy believes should be brought to the attention of the House or the Department or myself, or if he has some evidence to suggest that the process was anything other than fair or anything other than, well, if you haven't, what you've done is you've given up.
Deputy, sorry,
you had a good run at it.
You are a former minister.
Yeah, and you should.
You should at least give the courtesy.
Thanks, Cahill.
You had your 6 minutes. He's entitled to his 6 minutes. So yeah. I'm asking you, please.
Yeah, and thank you, Cahill. Look, I mean, the Deputy will know well that Fáilte Ireland have, their board and the chairperson would take the appointment of the CEO extremely seriously. And at a recent meeting where a briefing that I had with the chairperson, Fáilte Ireland as a National Tourism Development Authority are very conscious of the fact that we need a good person heading up the organisation, particularly in the context of Brexit. So if there is any suggestion that there's been any impropriety or anything untoward in relation to the appointment of a person, I think if people have a suggested reason as to why they believe that there has been some sort of impropriety, they have an obligation to bring that forward. I haven't heard other than the Deputy's disappointment.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't heard anything other than
time has.
Look, if the Deputy would refrain from constantly interrupting me, he might actually have gotten a reply.
Look, the time has concluded. I thank you both, even though it was a little bit difficult to control there at times. But thank you both for your contribution, and we have to wait now for, I think it's Minister English is taking questions.